Hello and welcome all tonight to this one-night viewing of Thornton Wilder's Our Town. The famous line we hear in this show is, does anyone ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. For the experience of getting the go-ahead for the show, the casting of the show, and finally trying to put up the show, this term definitely hits home. The whole cast put their love and soul and dedication to this show as much as they could in these trying times. I could not be more proud of them than I already am. I thank them for giving me this experience and allowing me to direct them and trusting me to keep them safe in these times of uncertainty. I'm happy we have got to have this unique experience and proud to call them my cast. And without further ado, I am proud to present to you Webb Valley West's production of Our Town. Act 1. No curtain, no scenery. The audience arriving sees an empty stage and half light. Presently, the stage manager, hat on and pipe in mouth, enters and begins placing a table and 3 chairs downstage left and a table and 3 chairs downstage right. He also places a low bench at the corner of what will be the Webb house on stage left. Left and right are from the point of view of the actor facing the audience. Up is toward the back wall. As the house lights go down, he has finished setting the stage and leaning against the right proscenium pillar, watches the late arrivals in the audience. When the auditorium is in complete darkness, he speaks.
This play is called Our Town. It was written by Thornton Wilder, produced and directed by Kevin Hettrich and the Wyoming Valley West High School. In it, you will see many of its students. The name of our town is Grover Corners, New Hampshire, just across the Massachusetts line. Latitude 42 degrees, 40 minutes. Longitude 70 degrees, 37 minutes. This first act shows a day in our town. The day is May 7th, 1901. The time is just before dawn. The sky is beginning to show some streaks of light over the east there, beyond our mountain. The morning star always gets so bright the minute it has to go, doesn't it? Well, I'd better show you where our town lies. Up here, this is Main Street. Way back there is the railroad station. Tracks go that way. Polish towns across the tracks and some Canuck families. Over there is the Congregational Church. Across the street's the Presbyterian. Methodist and Unitarian are over there. Baptist is down by the Hula, by the river. Catholic Church is just beyond the tracks. Here's the town hall and post office combined. Jail's in the basement. Brian wants me to speech from these very steps here. Along here is a row of stores, hitching posts and horse blocks in front of them. First automobile is going to come around here in about 5 years or so. Belonging to Banker Cartwright, our richest citizen. He lives in the big white house up on the hill over there. Here's the grocery store, and here's Mr. Morgan's drugstore. Most everybody in town manages to look into these stores twice a day. Public school's over yonder. High school's still a little further. 9:15 mornings, noon times, and 3 o'clock afternoons. The whole town can hear the yelling and the screaming from the schoolyards, the school children. This is our doctor's house, Doc Gibbs. Here is the back door. There are some scenery for those who think they have to have scenery. This is Miss Gibbs' garden, corns, peas, beans, hollyhocks, heliotropes, and a lot of burdock. In those days, our newspaper comes out twice a week, Grover Corners Sentinel. And this is at our Webb's house. And this is Miss Webb's garden, just like Miss Gibbs, only it's got a lot of sunflowers too. Right here's a big butternut tree. Nice town, you know what I mean? Nobody very remarkable comes out of it as far as we know. The earliest tombstones in the cemetery up here on the mountain say 1670 to 1680. They're Grovers and Cartwrights and Gibbses and Herseys, same names as they're around here. Well, as I said, it's just about dawn. The only light on our town is in a cottage over by the tracks where Polish mothers just had twins. And in the Joe Crowell house where Joe Jr. is getting up to go deliver the paper. And in the depot where Shorty Hawkins is getting ready to flag the 5:45 for Boston. Naturally, out in the country all around, there have been lights on for some time. With what milkings and so go on, the townspeople sleep late. So, another day has begun. There's Doc Gibbs coming down Main Street now, coming back from the baby case.
Mrs. Gibbs, a plump, pleasant woman in the mid-30s, comes downstairs right. She pulls up an imaginary window shade in her kitchen and starts to make a fire in her stove.
And here's his wife coming downstairs to get breakfast. Doc Gibbs died in 1930. The new hospital's named after him. Miss Gibbs died first, a long time ago, in fact. She went out to visit her daughter, Rebecca, who married an insurance man in Canton, Ohio, and died there, pneumonia. But her body was brought back here. She's up in the cemetery now, in with a whole mess of Gibbses and Herseys. She was Julia Hersey before she married Doc Gibbs in the Congregational Church over there. In our town, we like to know the facts about everyone. Oh, and there's Miss Webb coming down to make breakfast as well. And, of course, that's Doc Gibbs. Got the call at about 1:30 this morning. And here comes Joe Crowell Jr., delivering Mr. Webb's sentinel.
Morning, Doc Gibbs.
Morning, Joe.
Somebody's been sick, Doc?
No, just some twins born over in Polish Town.
Do you want your paper now?
Yes, I'll take it. Anything serious going on in the world since Wednesday?
Yes, sir. My school teacher, Miss Foster, is getting married to a fellow over in Concord.
Well, I declare. How do you boys feel about that?
Well, of course, it's none of my business, but I think if a person starts out as a teacher, she ought to stay one.
How's your knee, Joe?
Fine, Doc. Never think about it at all. Only like you said, it always tells me when it's going to rain.
What's it telling you today? Going to rain?
No, sir.
Sure?
Yes, sir.
And you ever make a mistake?
No, sir.
Joe goes off. Dr. Gibbs stands reading his paper. Mrs. Gibbs crosses to cupboard, cuts several slices of bread, then cuts a pie.
Want to tell you something about that boy Joe Crowell there. Joe was awful bright, graduated from high school here, head of his class. So he got a scholarship from Massachusetts Tech and graduated head of his class there too. It was all wrote up in the Boston papers at the time.
Dr. Gibbs turns paper inside out, yawns. Mrs. Gibbs opens cupboard for tablecloth, crosses to spread it on table, crosses to cupboard for cup and spoon, crosses to set them on table for Dr. Gibbs.
Going to be a great engineer, Joe was. But the war broke out and he died in France. All that education for nothing.
Sound of milk bottles is heard off stage.
Hey there, Bessie. What's the matter with you today?
Mrs. Gibbs crosses the stove, turns bacon, breaks 4 eggs into skillet.
Here comes Howie Newsome delivering the milk.
Howie Newsome, about 30, in overalls, comes along Main Street from the left, walking beside an invisible horse and wagon and carrying an imaginary rack with milk bottles. The sound of clinking milk bottles. The sound of clinking milk bottles continues through Howie's scene, except when he sets down the rack. He stops center to talk to Dr. Gibbs.
Morning, Doc.
Morning, Howie.
Somebody sick?
Pair of twins over in Mrs. Gorolowski's.
Twins, eh? This town's getting bigger every year.
Going to rain, Howie?
No. Fine day. That'll burn through. Come on, Bessie.
Hello, Bessie. How old is she, Howie?
Going on 17. Bessie don't make step out the road ever since the Lockhart stopped taking the quart of milk every day. Well, she wants to leave McCourt just the same. Keeps telling me they all trip.
He reaches Mrs. Gibbs' back door. She's waiting for him. Mrs. Gibb opening the door, which she leaves open.
Good morning, Howie.
Morning, Mrs. Gibbs. The doctor's coming down the street.
Is he? Seems like you're late today.
Yeah, someone wrong was separated. Don't know what was. Doc?
Howie.
Mrs. Gibbs taking milk to cupboard and calling upstairs.
Children! Children! Time to get up!
Come on, Betsy.
George! Rebecca!
Mrs. Webb puts biscuits in oven, gets tablecloth, dishes, etc. from cupboard and lays table, making several trips. Dr. Gibbs arrives at his back door and passes through the trellis into his house. Mrs. Gibbs taking bread from the cupboard to the table.
Everything all right, Frank?
Yes, I declare. Easy as kittens.
Mrs. Gibb crossing to stove for coffee pot.
Bacon will be ready in a minute. Sit down and drink your coffee.
Crossing to pour coffee in his cup, then sets pot back on stove.
You can catch a couple hours of sleep this morning, can't you?
Wentworth's coming at 11. Guess it's about 2. Her stomach ain't what it ought to be.
All told, you won't get more than 3 hours sleep. Frank Gibbs, I don't know what's going to become of you. I do wish I could get you to go away someplace and take a rest. I think it would do you some good.
Emily, time to get up! Wally, 7 o'clock!
Mrs. Gibbs crossing to set 3 places at the table.
I declare you've got to speak to George. Seems to me something's come over him lately. He's no help to me at all. I can't even get him to cut me some wood.
Is he sassy to you?
No, he just whines. All he thinks about is that baseball. George! Rebecca! You'll be late for school!
Mm-hmm.
George!
George, look sharp.
Yes, boss!
Mrs. Gibbs turns eggs. Dr. Gibbs, as he goes off the stage.
Don't you hear your mother calling you? I guess I'll go upstairs and get 40 winks.
Wally! Emily! You'll be late for school! Wally, you wash yourself good or I'll come up and do it myself!
Serve
Ma! Ma, what dress should I wear?
Don't make a noise. Your father's been up all night and needs his sleep. I washed and ironed the blue jam for you special.
Ma, I hate that dress.
Oh, hush up with you.
Every day I go to school dressed like a sick turkey.
Now, Rebecca, you always look very nice.
Mama, George is throwing soap at me.
I'll come and slap the both of you. That's what I'll do.
We've got a factory in our town, too. Hear it? It makes blankets. Cartwright owns it, and it's brung him a fortune.
The children dash in and take their places at the tables. Right, George, about 16, and Rebecca, 11. Left, Emily and Wally, same ages. They carry strapped books. Mrs. Gibbs crosses to the stove for coffee pot, pours coffee for George, replaces pot on stove, crosses to cupboard to pour glasses of milk, places it on the table for Rebecca, goes to cupboard for butter.
Children, now I won't have it. Breakfast is just as good as any other meal, and I won't have you gobbling it up like wolves. It'll stunt your growth, and that's a fact. Put away your book, Wally.
Ma, by 10 o'clock I gotta know all about Canada.
You know the rules well as I do. No books at the table. As for me, I'd rather have my children healthy than bright.
I'm both, Mama. You know I am. I'm the brightest girl in school for my age. I have a wonderful memory.
Eat your breakfast. I'm bright too. When I'm looking at my stamp collection.
I'll speak to your father about it when he's rested. Seems to me 25 cents a week's enough for a boy your age. I declare I don't know how you spend it all.
Oh, Ma, got out of things to buy.
Strawberry phosphates. That's what you spend it on.
Well, I don't see how Rebecca comes out so much money. She has more than $1.
I've been saving it up gradual.
Well, dear, I think it's a good thing to spend some money every now and then.
Mama, do you know what I love more than anything else in the world? Money.
Eat your breakfast.
An old-fashioned school bell is heard in the distance.
Mom, we've got to go. The bell just rang. We got to leave. I gotta go.
Oh, I gotta go.
We have to go.
Ah.
The children rise, seize their books, and dash out through the trellises. They meet down center and chattering, walk to Main Street, then turn left and exit. The stage manager goes off unobtrusively right.
Walk fast, but you don't have to run. Wally, fold your pants above the knee. Stand up straight, Emily.
Tell Miss Foster I sent her my best congratulations. Can you remember that?
Yes, Ma.
You look real nice, Rebecca. Pick up your feet. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Good riddance.
Mrs. Gibbs fills her apron with food for the chickens and comes down to the footlights. Sounds of excited chickens.
Here, cheeky. No, hey, go away, you. Oh, God. All you do is fight. Fight. That's all you do, no matter what I do. You don't belong here. You're not one of mine, do you? Where'd you come from?
Flinging last of her feed, which causes loud clucks. She shakes her apron. Mrs. Webb, laden with 2 large bowls, crosses through trellises, sits on bench, and begins stringing beans.
Oh, don't be so scared. Nobody's going to hurt you. Good morning, Myrtle. How's your cold?
I still get that tickling feeling in my throat. I told Charles I don't know as I would go to choir practice tonight. Wouldn't be any use.
Have you tried singing over your voice?
Yes, but I simply can't do that and stay on key. I thought while immersing myself, I would string some of these beans.
Let me help you. Beans are for good this year.
I decided to put up 40 quarts if it kills me. The children say they hate them, but I noticed they're able to get them down all winter.
Now, Myrtle, I've got to tell you something. Because if I don't tell somebody, I'll burst.
Why, Julia Gibbs.
Here, give me some more of those beans. Myrtle, did one of those second-hand furniture men from Boston come see you last Friday?
No.
Well, he called on me. First, I thought he was a patient waiting to see Dr. Gibbs, and he wormed his way into my parlor. And Myrtle Webb, he offered me $350 for Grandmother Wentworth's highboy, as I'm just sitting here.
Why, Julia Gibbs?
He did, for that old thing. I was so big I didn't know where to put it. I almost gave it to Cousin Hester Wilcox.
Well, you're going to take it, aren't you?
I don't know.
You don't know? $350? Let's come over you.
Well, if I could get the doctor to take the money and go away someplace on a real trip, I'd sell it like that. You know, Myrtle, it's been the dream of my life to see Paris, France.
Glances shyly at Mrs. Webb, who is shocked, then laughs, hand to face.
I don't know, it sounds crazy, I suppose, but for years I've been promising myself that if we ever had the chance.
How does the doctor feel about it?
Well, I did beat around the bush a little bit and said that if I got a legacy, that's the way I put it, I'd make him take me somewhere.
What did he say?
Oh, you know how he is. I haven't heard a serious word out of him since I've known him. No, he said it might make him discontented with Grover's Corners to go tropsing about Europe. Better let well enough alone, he says. Every 2 years he makes a trip to the battles of the Civil War, and that's enough treat for anybody, he says.
Well, Mr. Webb just admires the way that Dr. Gibbs knows everything about the Civil War. Mr. Webb's a good mind to give up on Napoleon and move over to the Civil War. Only, Dr. Gibbs, being one of the greatest experts in the country, just makes him despair.
That's a fact. Dr. Gibbs is never so happy as when he's at Antietam or Gettysburg. The times I've walked over those hills, Myrtle, stopping at every bush and pacing it all about, like we were going to buy it.
Well, if that second-hand man's really serious about buying it, Julia, you sell it. They don't get to see Paris, all right? Just keep dropping hints from time to time. That's how I got to see the Atlantic Ocean, you know.
I'm sorry I mentioned it. Only it seems to me that once in your life before you die, you ought to see a country where they don't talk in English and don't even want to.
The stage manager enters briskly from the right. He tips his hat to the ladies, who nod their heads.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to skip a few hours. But first, we want a little more information about the town. A scientific account, you might say. So, I've asked Professor Willard of our State University to sketch a few details of our past history here. Is Professor Willard here?
Professor Willard, a rule servant, savant, panache on a wide satin ribbon, enters from the right with some notes in his hand.
May I introduce Professor Willard of our State University? A few brief notes, Professor. Unfortunately, our time is very, very limited.
Grover's Corners. Let me see. Grover's Corners lies on the old Palestine grind of the Appalachian Range. I may say it's some of the oldest land in the world. We're very proud of that. The shelf of the volume below crosses the vestige of Mesozoic shale and some sandstone outcroppings. That's almost recent. 200, 300 million years old. Some highly interesting fossils have been found in South Beckham's cow pasture. They can be seen at the museum or university at any time. That is, any reasonable time. Frey or Professor Gruber's notes on the meteorological situation, precipitation, etc.
Afraid we won't have time for that, Professor. We might have a few brief notes on the history of man here.
Yes. Anthropological data. Early Indian stock, Cotahuasi tribes, no evidence before the 10th century of this era. Now entirely disappeared. Possible traces in 3 families. Migration toward the end of the 17th century of English Brachiocephalic and blue-eyed stock, for the most part, since then some Slav and Mediterranean.
And the population, Professor Willard?
Within the time limits, 2,640.
Just a moment, Professor.
Oh, yes, indeed. The population at the moment is 2,642. The postal district named 507 more, making a total of 3,149. Mortality and birth rate constant by McPherson's gauge, 6,032.
Thank you very much, Professor. We're all very much obliged to you, I'm sure.
Not at all, sir. Not at all.
This way, Professor, and thank you again. Now, the political and social report. Editor Webb. Mr. Webb!
He'll be here in a minute. He just cut his hand while he was eating an apple.
Thank you, Miss Webb.
Charles! Everybody's waiting!
Mr. Webb is a publisher and editor of the Grover Corner Sentinel. That's our local newspaper, you know.
Well, I suppose there's no need to tell you that we're run here by a board of selectmen. All males vote at age 21, and women vote indirect. We're mostly lower middle class, a sprinkling of professional men, about 10% illiterate laborers. Politically, we're 86% Republicans, 6% Democrats, 4% Socialists, and the rest indifferent. Religiously, we're 85% Protestant, 6% Catholic, rest indifferent.
Have you any comments, Mr. Webb?
Oh, very ordinary town, if you ask me. Little better behaved than most, probably a lot duller, but our young folk here seem to like it well enough. 90% of them graduating from college come right back here to live, even if they've been out of state.
Now, is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask Editor Webb anything about the town?
Is there much drinking in Grover's Corners?
Well, ma'am, I don't know what you would mean by much. Every Saturday, the farmhands go to Ellery Stable and they holler some. And we've got our town drunk, 1 or 2 of them, but They're always having remorses every time a member of the clergy comes to town. No, ma'am, I'd say liquor ain't something normal around here, except maybe in the medicine chest. It's been right good for a snake bite. Always was.
Is there no one in town aware
Come
of...
forward, will you, where we can all hear you. What were you
Is there
saying?
no one in town aware of social injustice and industrial inequalities?
Oh, well, it's always something terrible, you know. It seems like everybody's arguing about who's rich and who's poor.
Then why don't they do anything about it?
Well, I don't know. I guess everybody's hunting for a way that the sensible and smart can rise to the top, and those lazy and quarrelsome can sink to the bottom, but it ain't easy to find. Meanwhile, all we can do is help those who can't help themselves, and those others, we can leave alone. Are there any other questions?
Oh, Mr. Webb, Mr. Webb, is there any culture or love of beauty in Grover's Corners?
Well, ma'am, there ain't much. Not in the sense that you mean. Come to think of it, girls play their commencement in high school, and they dread it. But perhaps maybe now is the time to tell you that we've got pleasures one of a kind here, you know. We like to watch the birds. We pay a good deal of attention to them. We like to see the sun coming up over the mountain early in the morning. And we notice the change of the seasons. Everybody knows them. But those other things, you're right. There ain't much. Everybody knows Robinson Crusoe and the Bible and Handel's Largo and Whistler's Mother, but those are just about as far as we go.
So I thought. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Now, we'll go back to the town. It's early afternoon. 2,642 have had their dinners, and all the dishes have been washed. There's an early afternoon calm in our town. There's a buzzing and a humming. From the school building, only a few buggies on Main Street. The horses nosing at the hitching posts. You all remember what it's like. Doc Gibbs is in his office, had people making them say ah. Mr. Webb's coming, cutting his lawn over there. 1 man in 10 thinks it's a privilege to push his own lawnmower.
Lights are now at high noon. Chicken sounds are again heard for a moment. Shrill girls are heard off left. Mr. Webb kneels to pick grass from edge of walk.
No, sir. It's later than I thought. You can hear the children making their way back home from school already.
Emily comes along Main Street carrying some books. There are some signs that she is imagining herself to be a lady of startling elegance.
I can't, Lois. I've got to go home and help my mother. I promised.
Emily, walk simply. Who do you think you are?
Papa, you're terrible. 1 minute you tell me to stand up straight, and the next minute you call me names. I just don't listen to you.
Excuse me, Mrs. Forrest.
Oh, go out and play in the fields, young man. You've got no business playing baseball on Main Street.
I'm awfully sorry, Mrs. Forrest. Hey, Emily.
Hello.
You made a fine speech in class.
Well, I was really ready to make a speech about the Monroe Doctrine, but at the last minute, Miss Corcoran made me talk about the Louisiana Purchase instead. I worked an awful long time on both of them.
You know, it's funny. From my window up there, I can see your head nights when you're doing homework over in your room.
Why, can you?
You certainly do stick to it, Emily. I don't see how you can sit for that long. I guess you like school.
Well, I figure it's just something you have to go through.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind it, really. It passes the time.
Yeah. Emily, what do you think? We might, I don't know, we're going to kind of telegraph from your tone to mine, and every now and then you can kind of give me a hint or two on those algebra problems. I don't mean the answers, though. Of course not, just, a little hint or two.
I think hints are allowed. So, if you get stuck, George, then you just whistle to me and I'll give you some hints.
Emily, you're just naturally bright, I guess.
I figure that it's just the way a person's born.
Yeah, but you see, I want to be a farmer. And my Uncle Luke says whenever I'm ready, I can come work on his farm, and if I'm any good, I can just gradually have it.
You mean the house and everything?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I better get going to the baseball field. Thank you for the talk, though. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, Mrs. Webb.
Good afternoon, George.
So long, Emily.
So long, George.
Emily, come and help me string these beans for the winter. George Gibbs really allowed himself to have a real conversation, didn't he? Why, he's growing up. How old would George be?
I don't know.
Let's see. He must be almost 16.
Mama, I made a speech in class today and it was very good.
Well, then you must recite it for your father at supper. What was it about?
The Louisiana Purchase. It was like silk off a spool. I'm going to make speeches all my life. Mama, are these big enough?
Try to get them a little bigger if you can.
Mama, can you answer me a question? Serious?
Seriously, dear. Not serious.
Seriously, will you?
Of course I will.
Mama, am I good looking?
Yes, of course you are. All of my children have got great features. I'd be ashamed if they hadn't.
No, Mama, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, am I pretty?
I have already told you, yes. Now, that's enough of that. You have a nice, young, pretty face. I never heard of such foolishness.
Oh, Mama, you never tell us the truth about anything.
I am telling you the truth.
Mama, were you pretty?
Why, yes, if I do say it. I was the prettiest girl in town next to Mommy Cartwright.
But, Mama, you've got to say something about me. Am I pretty enough to get people interested in me?
Emily, you make me tired. Now stop it. You're pretty enough for all normal purposes. Now, come along and bring that bowl with you.
Oh, Mama, you're no help at all.
During the scene, the lights have gradually dimmed into late afternoon. Now they slowly change to night.
Thank you. That'll do. We'll have to interrupt here again. Thank you, Miss Webb. Thank you, Emily. There are some more things we want to explore about this town. I think it's a good time to tell you what the Cartwright interests just begun building. A new bank in Grover's Corners. Had to go to Vermont all the way there for the marble, sorry to say. Invest a friend of mine what they should do, and to put in the cornerstone for people to dig up 1,000 years from now. Of course, we've put in a copy of the New York Times and a copy of Mr. Webb's Sentinel. We're kind of interested in that because some scientific fellas have found a way of painting all of that reading material with a glue, silicate glue, that makes it keep 1,000 to 2,000 years. We're putting in a Bible and the Constitution of the United States, and a copy of William Shakespeare's plays. What do you say, folks? What do you think? You know, Babylon once had 2 million people in it, and all we know about them is the names of the kings, some copies of wheat contracts, and the contracts for the sale of slaves. Yet, every night all those families sat down to supper, and the father came home from his work, and the smoke went up in the chimney, same as here. And even in Greece and Rome, all we know about them is the real life. Those people is what we can piece together out of the joking poems and of the comedies that they wrote for the theater back then. So I'm going to have a copy of this play put in a cornerstone, and the people 1,000 years from now will know a few simple facts about us. More than the Treaty of Versailles and the Lindbergh fight. See what I mean? So, people 1,000 years from now. This is the way we were in the province of New York at the beginning of the 20th century. This is the way we were in our growing up, and in our marrying, in our living, and in our dying. Well, a great deal of time has gone by. It's evening. You can hear the choir practice going on at the Congregational Church. The children are home doing their schoolwork. The day is running down like a tired clock.
He listens a minute, then withdraws downstage. At the end of the first line of the hymn, lights in the pit have come up showing the heads of the choir silhouetted as they face the stage, while Stimson conducts them, facing the audience, now slightly drunk. Now look here, everybody. Music come into the world to give pleasure. Works again. Choir starts again. Blessed be the tie that binds, with increasing volume. At the end of the second phrase, gently, softer. They still increase in volume, and he suddenly becomes fierce. Softer. Choir stops. Get it out of your heads that music's only good when it's loud. You leave loudness to the Methodists. You couldn't beat them even if you wanted to. Now again, tenors. Choir sings 3 verses of Blessed Be the Tie That Binds.
Emily!
Hello.
Hey!
I can't work at all. The moonlight's so terrible.
Emily, did you get the third problem?
Dr. Gibbs comes downstairs and sits at the table, takes a book from it, then reads.
Which?
The third?
Well, yes, George, that's the easiest of them all.
I don't see it. Emily, can you give me a hint?
I'll tell you one thing, the answer's in yards.
In yards? What do you mean?
In square yards.
Oh. In square yards, yeah.
Yes, George, don't you see?
Yeah.
In square yards of wallpaper?
Wallpaper. Oh, I see. Thanks a lot, Emily.
You're welcome. My, isn't the moonlight just terrible? And with choir practice going on, I think if you hold your breath, you can hear the train all the way to Contacook. Do you hear it?
Huh. What do you know?
Well, I guess I better go back and try to work.
Oh, good night, Emily, and thanks.
Good night, George.
Both return unwillingly to work, but almost immediately give up and gaze at the moon, chins on hands. Before I forget it, how many of you will be able to come in Tuesday afternoon and sing at Fred Hersey's wedding? Show your hands. That'll be fine. That'll be right nice. We'll do the same music as we did for James Trowbridge's wedding. Now we'll do Art Thou Weary, Art Thou Languid. It's a question, ladies and gentlemen. Make it talk. Ready?
Hey, George. Can you come down a minute?
Yes, Pa.
Make yourself comfortable, George. I'll only keep you a minute. George, how old are you?
I'm 16, almost 17.
What do you want to do after school's over?
Why, you know, Pa. I want to be a farmer on Uncle Luke's farm.
You'll be willing, will you, to get up early and milk and feed the stock, and you'll be able to hoe and hay all day?
Sure I will. What do you mean, Pa?
Well, George, while I was in my office today, I heard a funny sound. And what do you think that was? It was your mother in the backyard chopping wood. There you see your mother, getting up early, cooking meals all day long, washing, ironing, and she still has to go out in the backyard and chop wood. I suppose she just got tired of asking you. She just gave up and decided it was easier to do it herself. And you eat her meals, put on clothes she keeps nice for you, and you run off to play baseball. Like she's some hired girl we keep around the house, but we don't like very much. Well, I knew all I had to do was call your attention to. Here's a handkerchief. George, I've decided to raise your spending money 25 cents a week. Not, of course, for chopping wood for your mother, because that's something you give her, but because you're getting older. And I imagine there are a lot of things you must find to do with it.
Thanks, Bob.
Let's see. Tomorrow's your payday. You can count on it. Probably Rebecca will feel like she'll have to have some more too. What's going to happen to your mother? Choir practice is never as late as this before.
It's only 8:30.
I don't know why she's in that old choir anyway. She hasn't had more in a voice than an old crow, traipsing around the streets at night this hour of the night. Just about time you retired, don't you think?
Yes, Pa.
George mounts his place on the ladder, gazes at the moon. Dr. Gibbs soon resumes reading. Laughter and good nights can be heard off stage left, and presently Mrs. Gibbs, Mrs. Soames, and Mrs. Webb come down Main Street. When they arrive at the corner of the stage, they stop.
Good night, Martha. Good night, Mr. Foster. I'll tell Mr. Webb. I just know he'll want to put it in the paper.
Bye, it's late.
Good night, Irma.
Real nice choir practice, wasn't it? Myrtle, Webb, look at that moon, will you? Potato weather for sure.
Naturally, I didn't want to say a word about it in front of those others. But now we're alone. Really, it's the worst scandal that ever was in this town.
What?
Simon Stimson.
Now, Luella.
But Julia, to have the organist of a church drink and drunk year after year, you know he was drunk tonight.
Now, Luella, we all know about Mr. Stimson, and we all know about the troubles he's been through. And if Dr. Ferguson keeps him on there and in his job, the only thing the rest of us can do is just not notice it.
Not to notice it, but it's getting worse.
No, it isn't, Luella. It's getting better. I've been a part of that choir twice as long as you have, and it doesn't happen nearly as so often. I hate to go to bed on a night like this. I better hurry. Those children will be up till all hours. Good night, Luella.
They all exchange good nights. She hurries downstage, to her house, and disappears. Emily, as Mrs. Webb passes her, excitedly blows out. Ida switches off the light, then shines on her face from the ladder shelf, and again gazes at the moon.
Can you get home safe, Luella?
It's as bright as day. I can see Mr. Soames scowling out the window now. You'd think we've been to a dance the way the menfolk carry on.
Both laugh, start on their ways. More good nights. Mrs. Gibb arrives at her home and passes through the trellis into the kitchen. George snaps off the light on his ladder shelf as his mother goes by.
Well, we had a real good time.
You're late enough.
Hi, Frank. It ain't any later than usual.
And you stopping at the corner to gossip with a lot of hens.
Now, Frank, don't be grouchy. Come out and smell the heliotrope in the moonlight.
He puts book reluctantly on table and rises. They stroll out arm in arm along the footlights. A Bob White calls 3 times. They speak quietly.
Isn't that wonderful?
I stop to survey the moonlit scene out front.
What did you do all the time I was away?
I read, as usual. What were the girls gossiping about tonight?
Well, believe me, Frank, there is something to gossip about.
Simon Stimson far gone, was he?
Worst I've ever seen him. How'd that end, Frank? Dr. Ferguson can't keep forgiving him forever.
Well, I guess I know more about Simon Stimson's affair than anyone else in this town. Some people ain't made for a small town life. I don't know how that'll end, but there's nothing we can do but just leave it alone. Come on, get in.
No, not yet, Frank. I'm worried about you.
What are you worried about?
I think it's my duty to make plans for you to get a real rest and change. And if I get that legacy, well, I'm going to insist on it.
Now, Julia, there's no sense in going over that again.
Frank, you're just unreasonable.
Come on, Julia, it's getting late. First thing you'll know, you'll catch cold. I gave George my mind tonight.
Turns inside, trellis closed door. Mrs. Gibbs picks up string from floor and winding it up, goes to cupboard and to leave it.
I reckon you'll have your wood chopped for a while anyway. No. Start getting upstairs.
Oh dear, there's always so many things to pick up. Seems like... You know, Frank, Mrs. Fairchild always locks her front door every night. All those people up that part of town do.
They're all getting citified. That's the trouble with them. They haven't got nothing to fit to burgle, and everyone really knows it.
They disappear. The sound of crickets. Rebecca tiptoes to George's ladder and climbs up beside him.
Get out, Rebecca! There's only room for one of us at this window. You're always spoiling everything.
Well, let me look just a minute.
Use your own window.
I did, but there's no moon there. George, do you know what I think, do you? I think maybe the moon's getting nearer and nearer, and there will be a big explosion.
Rebecca, you don't know anything. If the moon were getting near, the guys that sit up all night with telescopes would see it first, and they'd tell all about it. It'd be in all the newspapers.
George, is the moon shining on South America, Canada, and half the whole world?
Well, probably is.
The stage manager strolls on. Mr. Warren, an elderly policeman, comes along Main Street from the right, trying a doorknob every few feet. Mr. Webb enters from the left.
Nice. Good evening, Bill.
9:30. Most of the lights are out. No, there's Constable Warren trying a few doors on Main Street. And here comes Editor Webb after putting the newspapers to bed.
Good evening, Bill.
Evening, Mr. Webb.
Quite a moon.
Yep.
All quiet tonight?
Simon Stimson's rolling around a little. Just saw his wife moving out to hunt for him, so I looked the other way. There he is now.
Oh, good evening, Simon. It's getting a bit late out. Yes, Simon. It's a bit late. Town's dying down. I guess we better do the same. Can I walk a ways with you?
Simon Stimson continues on his way without a word and disappears at the right. Men turn to watch as he starts off.
Good night.
I don't know how that's going to end, Mr. Webb.
Oh, he's seen trouble one bit after another. He'll be fine. Bill, by the way, if you ever see my boy smoking cigarettes, just give him a word, will you? He thinks highly of you.
I don't think that he smokes no cigarettes, Mr. Webb. Leastways, not more than 2 or 3 a year.
I hope not. Well, have a good night.
Good night, Mr. Webb.
Who's that up there? Is that you, Myrtle?
No, it's me, Papa.
Emily, why aren't you in bed?
I don't know. I just can't sleep yet, Papa. The moonlight's so wonderful. And the smell of Mrs. Gibbs' heliotrope. Can you smell it?
Yes. Having any troubles on your mind, have you?
Troubles, Papa? No.
Okay, good. Just don't let your mom catch you, okay? Good night.
Good night, Papa.
Mr. Webb crosses into the house, whistling "Blessed Be the Ties That Bind," and disappears.
I never told you about that letter Jane Crawford got from her minister when she was sick. He wrote Jane a letter, and on the envelope, the address was like this. It said, Jane Crawford, the Crawford Farm, Grover's Corners, Sutton County, New Hampshire, United States of America.
What's funny about that?
But listen, it's not finished. The United States of America, continent of North America, Western Hemisphere, the Earth, the solar system, the universe, the mind of God. That's what it said on the envelope.
What do you know?
And the postman brought it just the same.
What do you know?
And that is the first act, friends. You can go and take a breather if you want a breather.
The stage lights dim and the actors walk off during the dim. End of Act 1. Act 2. The tables and chairs of the two kitchens are still on the stage. During intermission, the ladders and the small bench are withdrawn. A minute before curtain time, the stage lights fade gradually into an early morning blue. The stage manager has been at his accustomed place watching the audience returning to its seats. During the opening scene, morning light is gradually established.
3 years have gone by. Yes, the sun's come up over 1,000 times. Summers and winters have cracked the morning a little bit more, and the rains have brought down some of the dirt. Some babies that weren't even born before have begun talking regular sentences already, and a number of people who thought they were right young and spry have noticed they can't bound up a flight of stairs like they used to, without their heart fluttering a little. All that can happen in 1,000 days. Nature has been pushing and striving in other ways too. A number of young people fell in love and got married. Yes, the mountains got a bit away and a few fractions of an inch, millions of gallons of water run by the mill, and here and there a new home was set up under a pool. Almost everybody in the world gets married, you know what I mean? In our town, there aren't hardly any exceptions. Most everybody in the world climbs into their graves married. The first act was called Daily Life. This act is called Love and Marriage. There's a third act after this, and I guess you know what it already is. So, it's 3 years later. It's 1904 and July 7th, just after the high school commencement. That's the time most of our young people seem that they're fit to be married. Soon after, they pass their last examinations in solid geometry and Cicero's Origins. Looks like they suddenly feel themselves fit to be married. It's early morning. Only this time it's been raining. It's been pouring and thundering. Miss Gibbs' garden and Mr. Webb's here, drenched. All the bean poles and pea vines drenched. All yesterday over on Main Street, the rain looked like curtains being blown along. It may begin again at any minute. There, you can hear the 5:45 to Boston.
Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb enter their kitchens and start the day as in the first act. Mrs. Gibbs again raises the shade and window and makes her wood fire. Mrs. Webb shakes the grate, adds coal to her stove, turns damper, fills coffee pot at sink.
And there's Miss Gibbs and Miss Webb coming down to make breakfast just as though it was an ordinary day. I don't have to point out to the women in my audience that those ladies they see before them. Both of those ladies cooked 3 meals a day. One of them for 20 years, the other for 40, and no summer vacation. They brought up 2 children apiece, washed and cleaned the house, and never a nervous breakdown that we know of.
Mrs. Gibbs grinds coffee into pot above stove. Mrs. Webb puts pot on stove and starts to make cornbread.
It's like one of those Middle East poets said. You've got to love life to have life, and you've got to have life to love life. It's what they call a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's it.
Sounds of milk bottles in a rack starts off left and continues through scene as in Act 1. Mrs. Gibbs crosses the sink to pump water into a pot.
And here comes Howie Newsome delivering the milk. And there's Crowell delivering the papers like his brother before him.
Stage manager watches a moment, then drifts off downstage. Mrs. Gibbs crosses to pump water into coffee pot. Crowell has entered, hurling imaginary newspapers into doorways per Joe Crowell's routine in Act 1. Howie Newsome has come along Main Street with Bessie.
Morning, Howie.
Morning, Si. Anything in the papers I didn't know?
Nothing much, except for losing about the best baseball pitcher Grover's Corners ever had, George Gibbs.
I reckon he is.
He could hit and run bases, too.
Yep, mighty fine ball player. Oh, Bessie, guess I can stop and talk if I have a mind to, eh?
I don't see how he could give up a thing like that. Just to get married? Would you, Howie?
I can't tell, Si. Never had any talent that way.
Constable Warren enters. He walks with a cane, a little older than before. They exchange good mornings.
You're up early, Bill.
Mrs. Gibbs puts French toast into skillet on stove, then gets cloth from cupboard, lays table, sets cup and plate for her dog.
Seeing if there's anything I can do to prevent a flood. River's been rising all night.
That's like Crowell over there, all worked up over here about George Gibbs retiring from baseball.
Yes, sir. That's the way it goes. Back in '84, we had a player. Even George Gibbs couldn't touch him. Name of Hank Todd. Went down to Maine and became a parson. Wonderful ball player, Howie. How does the weather look to you?
It ain't bad. Think maybe it'll clear up for good.
Constable Warren continues on his way. Si starts off throwing newspapers and exits. Mrs. Webb puts bacon on stove, then washes and dries her hand at sink. Howie Newsome brings the milk first to Mrs. Gibbs' house. She meets him by the trellis.
Good morning, Howie. Do you think it's going to rain again?
Morning, Mrs. Gibbs. Rain's so heavy, think maybe it'll clear up.
Certainly hope it will.
How much do you want today?
Well, I'm going to have a house full of relations, Howie. Looks to me like I'll need 3 milk and 2 cream.
My wife says to tell you we both hope they'll be very happy, Mrs. Gibbs. No, they will.
Thanks a lot, Howie. Tell your wife I hope she gets there for the wedding.
Yeah, she'll be there. She'll be there. She can. Morning, Mrs. Webb.
Good morning, Mr. Newsome. Now, I know I told you 4 quarts of milk, but I hope you can spare me another.
Yes, ma'am. And the 2 cream?
We'll start reading again, Mr. Newsome.
Well, I was just saying to Mrs. Gibbs how it may lighten up. Now, Mr. Newsome told me to tell you that we both hope they'll be very happy, Mrs. Webb. No, they will.
Thank you, Mr. Newsome, and thank Miss Newsome as well. And we're counting on seeing you both at the wedding.
Yes, Mr. Webb. We hope to go there. Couldn't miss that. Come on, Bessie.
Howie Newsome exits. Mrs. Webb takes 2 bottles to take to table above stove. Returns for 4 more. Mrs. Gibbs near stove stops to blow nose on verge of tears. Dr. Gibbs descends in shirt sleeves, trying to be cheerful.
Well, the day has come. You are losing one of your chicks.
Frank Gibbs, don't you say another word. I feel like crying every minute. Sit down and drink your coffee.
The groom's up shaving himself. Only they're not allowed to shave. Whistling and singing, like he's glad to leave us. Every now and then he says, "I do," to the mirror. That doesn't sound good to me.
I declare, Frank, I don't know how he'll get along. I've arranged his clothes and seen to it he's put warm things on. Frank, they're too young. Emily won't think of such things. He'll catch his death of a cold within a week.
I was remembering my wedding morning, Julia.
Now don't start that, Frank Gibbs.
I was the scariest young fella in the state of New Hampshire. I thought I'd make a mistake, for sure. When I saw you coming down the aisle, I thought you were the prettiest girl I've ever seen. But the only I'd never seen you before. There I was, in the Congregational Church, marrying a total stranger.
And how do you think I felt? Frank, weddings are perfectly awful things. Farces, that's what they are. Here, I made something for you.
Why, Percy, Frank Post!
Ain't hard to make. I had to do something.
Turns suddenly serious, crosses the stove and serves self. Pause. Dr. Gibbs pours on the syrup, round and round 4 times. Then,
how'd you sleep last night, Julia?
Well, I heard a lot of the hours struck off.
I get a shock every time I think of George setting out to be a family man. That great gangling thing. I'll tell you, Julia, there's nothing more terrifying in the world as a son. The relation of father and son is the darnest, awkwardest.
Well, mother and daughter's certainly no picnic, let me tell you.
You've had a lot of troubles. Suppose that's none of our business. Everyone has their own troubles.
Yes, people are meant to go through life 2 by 2. Isn't natural to be lonesome.
Julia, do you know one of the things I was scared of when I married you?
Oh, go along with you.
I would have material conversation more than last us a few weeks. We run silence. That's a fact. Well, you and I have been conversing for 20 years now without any noticeable barren spells.
Well, good weather, bad weather isn't very choice, but I always find something to say. Did you hear Rebecca stirring around upstairs?
No. Only day she isn't in everyone's business. Probably I got the impression she's crying.
Lord sakes, this has got to stop. Rebecca! Rebecca! Come and get your breakfast!
Dr. Gibbs wipes his mouth with a napkin. George comes rattling down the stairs, very brisk.
Morning, everybody. Only 5 more hours to live.
George Gibbs, where are you going?
To step across the grass to see Emily.
Now, George, you put on your overshoes. It's raining torrents. You don't go out of this house without you're prepared for it.
Ma, it's just a step.
George, you'll catch your death of a cold and cough all throughout the service.
George, do as your mother tells you.
Dr. Gibbs goes upstairs. George returns reluctantly to the kitchen and pantomimes putting on overshoes.
From tomorrow on, you can kill yourself in all weathers, but while you're in my house, you'll live wisely. Thank you very much. Maybe Miss Webb isn't used to callers at 7 in the morning.
George rises, crosses into Chelsea's.
Here, take a cup of coffee first.
Be back in a minute.
He crosses the
Good
stairs
morning.
over the puddles. Mrs. Gibbs shakes her head in annoyance, takes cup, pours coffee back in pot on the stove, and exits upstairs, crossing to her cheerily.
Good morning, Mother Webb.
Goodness, you frightened me. Now, George, I can let you in a minute out of the wet, but you know I can't ask you in.
Why not?
George, you know as well as I do, the groom can't see his bride on his wedding day. Not until he sees her in church.
That's just a superstition. Good morning, Mr. Webb.
Morning, George.
Mr. Webb, you don't believe in the superstition, do you?
Well, there's plenty of common sense in a superstition like that.
Millions have followed it, George, and you don't want to be the first to fly in the face of costume.
How is Emily?
She hasn't waked up yet. Haven't heard a sound out of her.
Emily's asleep?
No wonder. We're up till all hours sewing and packing. Now, George, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. You sit down here with Mr. Webb and drink this cup of coffee. I'll go upstairs and make sure Emily doesn't come downstairs and surprise you. Oh, and there's some bacon here too. But don't be long about it.
Exit
Well,
Mrs.
George.
Webb.
Well, George, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Mr. Webb, what sense could there be in a superstition like that?
Well, Emily's head ought to be full of clothes, one thing or another. Don't you think that's probably it?
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Girls might to be nervous on her wedding day.
I just wish a fella could get married without all the marching up and down.
That's how every man has ever felt. It's the women who own weddings, my boy. Man looks rather small at one. All those good women standing shoulder to shoulder, they make sure the knot is tied in a mighty public fashion.
But you believe in it, don't you, Mr. Webb?
Oh, of course. Wedding is a wonderful, wonderful thing, my boy. Don't forget about that.
Oh, no, sir, no. Mr. Webb, how old were you when you got married?
Well, you see, I'd been a couple years into college, and I'd taken a while to get settled down, but, well, she wasn't much older than what Emily is now. Age doesn't have anything to do with it, especially compared to other things.
What were you going to say, Mr. Webb?
What was it? Was I going to say something? George, I was thinking the other night of some advice my father gave me a while back. He said, George, you got to start off straight and just give her an order. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as it tells her to listen. And if anything she does irritates you, her tone of voice, her nagging, just leave the house. That'll show her who's boss. And also, he said, don't forget, never tell a woman how much money you have. Never.
Well, Mr. Webb...
So I took the opposite of his advice, and I've been happy ever since. And let that be a lesson to you, George. Never ask for advice on personal matters. Are you going to raise chickens in your farm?
What?
Are you going to raise chickens on your farm?
Uncle Luke's never been much interested, but I thought...
A book came into my office the other day, George. It was on the philo system of raising chickens, and I wanted to start in a small way, maybe in the backyard, and then eventually I could maybe put an incubator in the cellar, and then...
Charles, are you talking about that old incubator again? I thought you two be talking about things worthwhile.
Well, Myrtle, if you want to give the boy some good advice, I'll go up and I'll leave you with him.
George, Emily needs to come down and eat her breakfast. She sends you her love, but she simply doesn't want to lay eyes on you. So, goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye.
George crosses the stage to his own home, bewildered and crestfallen. He slowly dodges a puddle and disappears into his house. Mrs. Webb stands above the trellis, watching.
Well, Myrtle, I suppose they didn't tell you about the older superstition.
What do you mean, Charles?
Well, since the caveman, no groom has ever supposed to see his bride-to-be's father on the day of the wedding, or near it.
Exiting upstairs.
Now remember that.
Thank you very, very much. Mr. and Mrs. Webb, now I have to interrupt here again. You see, we want to know how all of this began. The wedding, the plan to spend a lifetime together. I am awfully interested in how these things begin. You know how it is. You're 21 or you're 22 when you make some decisions, then wish you're 70, you've been a lawyer for 50 years, and a white-haired lady at your side has eaten over 50,000 meals with you. How did such things begin? George and Emily are going to show you now the conversation they had when they first knew that, as the saying goes, they were meant for each other. But before they do that, I want you all to try to remember what it's like. What it was been like to have been very young, and particularly the days where you were first in love. When you were like a person sleepwalking. We didn't quite hear the street you were in, and you didn't quite hear everything that was said to you. You're just a little bit crazy. You remember that, please. Now, they'll be coming out of high school at the 3 o'clock. George has just been elected president of the junior class. And as it's June, that means he'll be president of the senior class next year. And Emily has been elected secretary and treasurer. I don't have to tell you how important that is.
Voices mount gaily as he places a board across the back of 2 chairs, which he takes from those at the Gibbs family's table. He brings 2 high stools from the wings and places them behind the board. Persons sitting on the stools will be facing the audience. This is the counter of Mr. Morgan's drugstore. Stage manager exits.
Yep, they'll be coming down Main Street at any moment.
Emily, carrying an armful of imaginary school books, comes along Main Street from the left, speaking off left as voices die out.
I can't, Louise. I've got to go home. Goodbye. Oh, Ernestine, can you come over tonight and do Latin? Isn't that Cicero just the worst thing? Well, tell your mother you have to. Goodbye, Helen. Goodbye, Fred.
George, also carrying the books, catches up with her.
Can I carry your books home for you, Emily?
Why, thank you. It isn't far.
She gives them to him. George takes her books under his arm, turns to speak off stage. Emily is shy and embarrassed.
Just a second. Say, Bob, if I'm a little late, just start practice anyways, okay? And give her some high ones for me.
Goodbye, Lizzie.
Goodbye, Lizzie. I'm awfully glad you were elected too, Emily.
Thank you.
They have been standing on Main Street almost against the back wall. They take the first steps toward the audience when George stops and says,
Emily, why are you mad at me?
I'm not mad at you.
You've been treating me so funny lately.
Well, George, since you asked me, I might as well say it right out. Goodbye, Mrs. Corcoran.
Goodbye, Miss Corcoran. What is it?
I don't like the change that's come over you in the last year. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I've got to tell the truth and shame the devil.
A change? What do you mean?
Well, up to a year ago, I used to like you a lot, and I used to watch you as you did everything because we'd been friends for so long, and then you began spending all your time at baseball, and you never stopped to speak to anybody anymore, not even to your own family you didn't. And George, it's the fact that you've gotten awful stuck up and conceited, and all the girls say so. They may not say it to your face, but that's what they say behind your back. And it hurts me to hear them say it, but I've got to agree with them a little. I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, but I can't be sorry I said it.
I'm glad you said it, Emily. I never thought such a thing was happening to me. I guess it's hard for a fella not to have faults creep into his character.
I expect a man to be perfect, and I think he should be.
Oh, I don't think it's possible to be perfect.
Well, my father is, and as far as I can tell, your father is. Makes no sense that you shouldn't be as well.
Well, I feel it's the other way around. That men aren't naturally good, but girls are.
Well, you might as well know right now that I'm not perfect. It's not as easy for a girl to be perfect as a man because we girls are more nervous. Now, I'm sorry I said all that to you. I don't know what made me say it.
Emily.
Now I can see it's not the truth at all, and suddenly I feel it's not as important anyway.
Emily, would you like an ice cream soda or something before you go home?
Well, thank you. I would.
George starts to take her arm, but is too shy. They advance toward the audience and make an abrupt right turn, opening the door of Morgan's drugstore. Under strong emotion, Emily keeps her face down. George speaks to some passerby.
Hey, Stu, how are you? Good afternoon, Mrs. Slocum.
George starts into the store, then steps back to let Emily go first. They cross the stools, and George puts books down on board. The stage manager, wearing spectacles and assuming the role of Mr. Morgan, enters abruptly from the right and stands between the audience and the counter of the soda fountain.
Hello, George. Hello, Emily. What do you have? Why, Emily Webb? What are you crying about?
She's got an awful scare, Mr. Morgan. She almost got run over by that hardware store wagon. I mean, everybody says that Tom Huckins drives like a crazy man.
Well, now, he'll take a drink of water, Emily. You look all shook up. I tell you, you got to look both ways before you cross Main Street now. Gets worse every year. What do you have?
I'll have a strawberry phosphate. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
No, Emily. Have an ice cream soda with me. 2 ice cream sodas, Mr. Morgan.
2 ice cream sodas. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are 125 horses in Grover's Corners this minute I'm talking to you. State inspectors was in here yesterday, and now they're bringing in these automobiles. The best thing they have to do is just stay home. Why, I can remember when a dog could go to sleep all day in the middle of Main Street and nothing come along to disturb him. Here you are. Enjoy them. Yes, Miss Alice, what can I do for you?
These are so expensive.
No, don't think of that. We're celebrating our election. And do you know what else I'm celebrating?
No?
I'm celebrating because I got a friend who tells me the things that ought to be told to me.
No, George, please don't think of that. I don't know why I said it. It's not true.
No, Emily, you stick to it. I'm glad you spoke to me like you did, but you'll see, I'm going to change so quick, you bet I'm going to change. And Emily, I want to ask you a favor.
What is it?
Well, if I go away to State Agricultural College next year, will you write me a letter every once in a while?
I certainly will, George. I certainly will. It certainly seems like being away 3 years, you get out of touch with things. You know, maybe letters from Grover's Corners won't be so interesting after a while. Grover's Corners isn't very important when you think about all of New Hampshire, but I think it's a very nice town.
The day wouldn't come when I wouldn't want to know everything that is happening here. And I know that that's true, Emily.
Well, then I'll try to make my letters interesting.
You know, Emily, whenever I meet a farmer, I always make it a point to ask him if he thinks it's important to go to agricultural school to be a good farmer.
Why, George?
Yeah, and some of them even say that it's a waste of time. You can get all those things anyway out of the pamphlets the government sends you. And Uncle Luke's, he's getting old. He's about ready for me to start taking over his farm tomorrow, if I could.
My.
And like you say, being gone, all that time, in other places, meeting other people, gosh, if anything like that can happen, I don't want it to go away. I guess new people aren't any better than the old ones. I'll bet they almost never are. Emily, I feel that you're as good a friend as I've got. I don't need to go and meet these other people in these other towns.
No, but George, maybe it's very important for you to go and learn about all of those, like cattle judging and soils and all those things. I mean, of course I don't know.
Emily, I'm going to make up my mind right now. I won't go. I'll tell Pa about it tonight.
No, but George, I don't see why you have to decide right now. It's a whole year away.
Emily, I'm glad you spoke to me about that fault in my character. What you said was right. But there was one thing wrong in it, and it was when you said that for a year I wasn't noticing people, and you, for instance, why, you say you were watching me when I did everything. I was doing the same about you all the time. Why, sure, I always thought of you as one of the chief people I thought about. I always made sure where you were sitting on the bleachers and who you were with. And for 3 days now, I've been trying to walk home with you, but something's always gotten in the way. Yesterday, I was standing over against the wall waiting for you when you walked home with Miss Corcoran.
George, your life's awful funny. How could I have known that? Well, I thought...
Listen, Emily, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to agricultural school. I think that once you found a person you're very fond of, I mean, a person who's fond of you too, and likes you enough to be interested in your character, well, I think it's just as important as college is, even more so. That's what I think.
I think that's awfully important too.
Emily.
Yes, George?
Emily, if I do improve, and I make a big change, would you be, could you be?
I am now. I always have been.
So, I guess it's been a pretty important talk we've been having.
Yes, guess it is.
Wait just a minute, and I'll walk you home.
Both rise. With mounting alarm, he digs into his pockets for the money. The stage manager enters right. George, deeply embarrassed, but directs says to him,
Mr. Morgan, I'll have to go home and get the money to pay for this. It'll only take me like a minute.
What's that? George Gibbs, you don't need to tell me.
Yes, but I had reasons. Look, take this gold watch and keep it until I come back with the money.
That's all right. Keep your gold watch. I trust you.
I'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll trust you 10 years, George. On a day over. Get over your shock, Emily.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Morgan. It was nothing.
I'm ready.
They walk in great silence across the stage and pass through the trellis at the Webb's back door and disappear. Stage manager watches them go out and turns to the audience, removing his spectacles.
Well, now it's time to get on with the wedding.
Immediate lights, except a pin spot which covers him, fade out. He stands, waiting while the set is prepared for the next scene. Stagehands remove the chairs, tables, and trellises from the Gibbs and Webb houses. They arrange more chairs facing up on either side of the aisle in close formation to suggest the pews of a church. The congregation will sit facing the back wall. The aisle of the church starts at the center of the back wall and comes toward the audience. A platform is placed against the back wall on which the stage manager will stand later, playing the minister. The image of a stained glass window is cast upon the back wall. When all is ready, the stage manager strolls to the center of the stage, down in front, and musingly addresses the audience.
There are a lot of things that need to be said about a wedding. There are a lot of thoughts that go on during a wedding. Yeah, we can't get all of them in one wedding, though, and not certainly one in Grover's Quarters, where they're an awful plain short. In this wedding, I play the minister. That gives me the right to say a few more things about it. For a while now, the play gets pretty serious. You see, some churches say that marriage is a sacrament. I don't quite know what that means exactly, but I can take a guess. Like Giffman said a few moments ago, people were made to live 2 by 2. This is a good wedding. If people are too put together that even at a good wedding, there is a lot of confusion way down deep in people's minds. And we thought that ought to be in our play too. The real hero of the scene isn't on stage at all, and you know who that is. It's like what one of those European fellows said. Every child is born into the world as nature's attempt to make a perfect human being. Well, I've seen nature pushing and constriving for some time now. We all know that nature is interested in quantity, but I'm pretty sure she's interested in quality too. That's why I'm in the ministry. And don't forget all the other witnesses at the wedding, the ancestors. Millions of them. Most of them set out to live 2 by 2, also. Millions of them. Well, that's my sermon, and it wasn't very long anyway.
Turning up stage, he walks up the church aisle, the organ playing Handel's Largo. The congregation streams into the church and sits in the audience. Church bells are heard. Mrs. Gibbs sits in front row, the first seat on the aisle. The right section next to her are Rebecca and Dr. Gibbs. Across the aisle, Mrs. Webb, Wally, and Mr. Webb. A small choir takes its place facing the audience under the stained glass window. Mrs. Webb, on the way to her place, turns back and speaks to the audience.
Oh, I don't know why I'm crying. I suppose there's nothing to cry about. It just came over me this morning. There was Emily sitting there eating her breakfast as she's done for the past 17 years, and now she's off to eat at someone else's house. I suppose that's it. And Emily, she suddenly said, I can't eat another mouthful. She laid down her head and she cried. Oh, I've got to say, there's just something downright cruel about sending our girls out to marriage this way. I just hope one of her girlfriends had told her a thing or two. It's cruel, I know, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. After all, I went to a blind as a bat myself. The whole world's wrong, that's for sure. Oh, look, here they come.
She hurries to her place in the pew. She sees George start to come down the right aisle of the theater through the audience. Suddenly, 3 members of his baseball team appear down stage right and start whistling and catcalling to him. They're dressed from the ball field.
Hey, George! Oh, big boy! Oh,
All right, that is enough of that!
Smiling, he pushes them off the stage. They lean back to shout a few more catcalls.
There used to be an awful lot of that kind of thing at weddings in the old days. Rome and later. We're more civilized now, or so they say.
The choir starts singing Love Divine, All Loves Excelling. George has reached the stage, having come up down the stage right aisle. He stares at the congregation a moment, then takes a few steps of withdrawal. Toward the right proscenium pillar, his mother, from the front row, seems to have felt his confusion. She leaves her seat and comes down the aisle quickly to him.
George, what's the matter?
Ma, I don't want to grow old. Why is everyone pushing me so?
Why, George, you wanted it.
No, Ma, listen to me.
No, George, you're a man now.
Listen, Ma, for the last time I ask you, all I want to do is be a fella.
George, if anyone should hear you. Oh, stop. Now, I'm ashamed of you.
What? Where's Emily?
George, you gave me such a turn.
Now, Ma, you save Thursday nights. Emily and I are going to come over, and you'll see, okay? Now, what are you crying for? Come on, we got to get ready for this.
Mrs. Gibbs, mastering her emotion, fixes his tie and whispers to him. In the meantime, Emily, in white and wearing her wedding veil, has come through the audience and mounted on the stage. She too draws back, frightened, when she sees the congregation in the church. As Emily appears, the choir begins, "Blessed be the tie that binds."
I've never felt so alone in my whole life.
Mr. Webb, hearing her, leaves his seat in the pews.
And George over there looking so... I hate him. I wish I were dead. Papa.
Emily. Calm down.
Papa, I don't want to get married.
Shh. Emily, everything's all right.
Why can't I stay for a while just as I am? Let's go away.
No, Emily, now stop and think for a moment.
No, don't you remember all the times you used to say that I was your girl? There must be a lot of places we can go. I'll work for you. I could keep house.
Shh. You mustn't think of such things, Emily. You're just nervous. George, will you come here for a moment? Why, you're marrying one of the best young fellows in the world. George is a fine fellow.
But Papa...
I'm giving my daughter away. Do you think you can take care of her?
Mr. Webb, I want to. I want to try. Emily, I'm going to do my best. I love you, Emily. I need you.
If you love me, then help me. All I want is someone to love me.
I will, Emily. I'll try.
And I mean forever. Do you hear me? Forever and ever.
They fall into each other's arms. The march from Langhurst is heard. The stage manager, as clergyman, stands on the box up center.
Come. They're waiting for us, and you'll know it'll be all right. Let's come quick.
George slips away and takes his place beside the stage manager / clergyman. Emily proceeds up the aisle on her father's arms. Mr. Webb arrives at the pulpit with Emily, leaves her facing George, and goes to his seat. The crowd has bustled with intense interest during the march and is now all attention.
Do you, George, take this woman Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold
Perfectly lovely wedding. Loveliest wedding I ever saw. Oh, I do love a good wedding. Don't you? Doesn't she make a lovely bride?
I do.
And do you, Emily, take this man, George, to be your wedded husband?
Don't know when I've seen such a nice, lovely wedding, but I always cry. Don't know why it is, but I always cry. I just like to see young people happy. Don't you? Oh, I think it's lovely.
I do.
The rings.
What?
The rings? George, the rings.
What?
The rings.
The rings?
The rings! I've married over 200 couples in my day. Do I believe it? I don't know. Married millions of them. The cottage, the go-kart, the Sunday afternoon drives in the Ford, the first rheumatism, the grandchildren, the second rheumatism, the deathbed, the reading of the will. Once in 1,000 times, it's interesting. Well, let's have Mendelssohn's wedding march.
The organ picks up the march. Church bells sound. The bride and groom come down the aisle, radiant but trying to be very dignified. The townspeople have gradually risen and turned to watch as they pass by.
Aren't they a lovely couple? Oh, I've never been to such a nice wedding. I'm sure they'll be happy. I always say, happiness, and that's the great thing. The important thing is to be happy.
The bride and groom reach the steps leaping into the audience. A bright light is thrown upon them. They descend into the auditorium and run up the aisle joyously.
That's all the second act, folks. 10 minutes intermission.
Act 3. During the intermission, the audience has seen the stagehands arranging the stage. On the right-hand side, a little right of center, 10 or 12 ordinary chairs have been placed in 3 openly spaced rows facing the audience. These are graves in the cemetery. Toward the end of the intermission, the actors enter and take their places. The front row contains, toward the center of the stage, an empty chair, then Mrs. Gibbs, Simon Stimson. The second row contains, among us, Mrs. Soames. The third row has Wally Webb. The dead do not turn their heads or their eyes to right or left, but they sit in a quiet without stiffness. When they speak, their tone is a matter of fact, without sentimental, above all, without lugubriousness. The stage manager takes his accustomed place and waits for the house lights to go down.
The time, this time, 9 years have gone by. Friends, summer, 1913. Gradual changes in Grover's Corners. Horses are getting rarer. Farmers coming into town in Fords. Everybody locks their house doors now at night. Ain't been any burglars in town yet, but everyone's heard about them. You'd be surprised, though. On the whole, things don't change much around here. This certainly is an important part of Grover's Corners. It's on a hilltop, a windy hilltop. Lots of sky, lots of clouds, often lots of sun and moon and stars. You come up here on a fine afternoon. You can see range on range of hills. Awful blue they are. Up there. By Lake Sunapee and Lake Winsapeak. And way up, if you've caught a glass, you can see the White Mountain and Mount Washington, where North Conway and Conway is. And of course, our favorite mountain, Mount Monadnock, right here. All these towns that lie around it. Jaffrey and East Jaffrey and Petersburg and Dublin. And there, quite a ways down, is Grover's Corners. Yes, the beautiful spot up here, mountain laurel and lilacs. I often wonder why people like to be buried in Woodlawn and Brooklyn, where they might pass the same time up here in New Hampshire. Over there are the old stones, 1670, 1680. Strong-minded people that come a long way to be independent. Some are people that walk around here laughing at the funny words on the tombstones. It don't do any harm. And genealogists come here from Boston. They get paid by city people looking for their ancestors. They want to make sure they're the daughters of the American Revolution or of the Mayflower. Well, I guess it don't do any harm either. Wherever you come near the human race, there's layers and layers of nonsense. Over there are some Civil War veterans, iron flags on their graves. New Hampshire boys, and the notion that the Union ought to be kept together, though they never seen more than 50 miles of themselves. They knew the name, friends, the United States of America. The United States of America. And they went and died about it. This here is the part of the cemetery. Here's your friend, Miss Gibbs. And let me see here, Mr. Stimson, organist at the Congregational Church, and Miss Soames, who enjoyed the wedding so, oh, you remember? Oh, and there's lots of others. And Editor Webb's boy, Wally, whose appendix burst while he was on a Boy Scout trip to Crawford. Notch. Yes, an awful lot of sorrow has the sort of quieted down up here. People just wild with grief have brought their relatives up to the hill. We all know how it is. And then time, and sunny days, and rainy days, and snow. We're all glad they're in a beautiful place, and we're coming up here ourselves when our fit's over. Now there are some things we all know, but we don't take them out, and we don't look at them very often. We all know that something is eternal. And it ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't earth, and it ain't even the stars. Everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal. And something has to do with human beings. All the greatest people that have ever lived have been telling us that for 5,000 years, and yet be surprised how many people are losing hold of it. There's something way down deep that's eternal about every human being. You know as well as I do, the dead don't just stay interested in us living people for very long. Gradually, they lose hold The thing that kept them here, tethered to this earth. The ambitions that they had, the pleasures, the things that they've suffered, and the people they have loved. They all get weaned away from the earth. That's how I put it. Weaned away. And they stay here while the earth, a part of them, burns away. And all the time they've got, slowly indifferent to what's going on in Grover's Corners. They're waiting for something they feel is coming, something important and great. Aren't they waiting for the eternal part of them to come out clear? Some of the things that they're doing say maybe they'll hurt your feelings, but the way it is, mother and daughter, husband and wife, enemy and enemy, money and misery, all those terrible, unimportant things, those kind of were prey around here. And what's left when your memory's gone? What's your identity, Miss Smith?
He looks at the audience a minute, then turns to the stage. Joe Stoddard, 60-odd, enters, crossing to glance at the grave moment, then turns downstage a bit and stands watching for mourners of left. He carries his hat at the same time. Sam Craig, 30, enters, wiping his forehead from the exertion. He carries an umbrella and strolls front.
Well, there are some living people. There's Joe Stoddard, our undertaker, supervising a new made grave. And here comes a Grover's Corners boy that left town to go out west.
Good afternoon, Joe Stoddard.
Good afternoon. Let me see now. Do I know you?
I'm Sam Craig.
Gracious sakes alive. 4 people. I should know you'd be back for the funeral. You've been away a long time, Sam.
Yes, I've been away over 12 years. I'm in business out in Buffalo now, Joe. But I was in the East when I got news of my cousin's death, so I thought I'd combine things a little and come home and see the old home. You look well.
Yes. Can't complain. Very sad today, our journey today, Samuel.
Yes.
Yes. I always say I hate to supervise when a young person is taken. So be here in a few minutes now. I had to come here early today. My son's supervising up at the home.
Old Farmer McCarty? I used to do chores for him after school. He had the lumbago.
Yes, we brought Father McCarty here a number of years ago now.
Why, this is my Aunt Julia. I'd forgotten that she... Of course.
Yes, Doc Gibbs lost his wife 2-3 years ago. About this time. Today's another pretty bad blow for him, too.
That's my sister's carriage boy, Sam Craig.
I'm always uncomfortable when they're around.
Simon.
Do they choose their own verses much, Joe?
No, not usual. Usually the bereaved pick a verse.
Doesn't sound like Aunt Julia. There aren't many of those Hersey's sisters left now. Let me see. I wanted to look at my father's and mother's.
Over at the Craigs, Avenue F.
He was an organist at the church, wasn't he? Drank a lot, we used to say.
Nobody's supposed to know about it. He'd seen a peck of trouble. He took his own life, you know.
Oh, did he?
Hung himself in the attic. They tried to hush it up, but of course he got around. He chose his own epitaph. See it there. Ain't a verse exactly.
Why, it's just some notes of music. What is it?
Oh, I wouldn't know. It was wrote up in the Boston papers at the time.
Joe, what did she die of?
Who?
My cousin.
Oh, didn't you know? Had some trouble bringing a baby into the world. 'Twas her second, though. There's a little boy about 4 years old.
The grave's gonna be over here?
Yes, there ain't much room over here among the Gibbses, so they'll bring up a whole new Gibbs section over by Avenue B. You'll excuse me now, I see they're coming.
From left to center at the back of the stage comes a procession, 4 men carrying a casket, invisible to us. All the rest are under umbrellas. One can vaguely see Dr. Gibbs, George, the Webbs, etc. They gather about a grave in the back center of the stage, a little to the left of center. Emily is among them, a black cloak covering her white dress.
Who is it, Julia?
My daughter-in-law, Emily Webb.
Well, I declare. The road up here must have been awful muddy. What did she die of, Julia?
In childbirth.
Childbirth. I'd forgotten all about that. My, wasn't life awful and wonderful?
Wonderful, was it?
Simon, now remember.
I remember Emily's wedding. Wasn't it a lovely wedding? And I remember her reading the class poem at graduation exercises. Emily was one of the brightest girls ever graduated from high school. I've heard Principal Wilkins say so time after time. I called on them at their new farm just before I died. Perfectly lovely farm.
It's on the same road we lived on.
Yep, right smart farm. They subside. The funeral group by the grave starts singing Blessed Be the Ties That Bind. I always liked that hymn. I was hoping they'd sing a hymn. Suddenly, Emily appears from among the umbrellas. She is wearing a white dress. Her hair is down her back and tied by a white ribbon like a little girl. She comes slowly, gazing wonderingly at the dead, a little dazed. She stops halfway and smiles faintly. After looking at the mourners for a moment, she walks slowly to the vacant chair beside Mrs. Gibbs and sits down.
Hello.
Hello, Emily.
Hello, M. Gibbs.
Hello, Mother Gibbs.
Emily?
Hello. It's raining.
Yes, they'll be gone soon, dear. Just rest yourself.
It seems thousands and thousands of years since I...
The funeral group suddenly sings second verse of Blessed Be the Tie That Binds.
Papa remembered that was my favorite hymn. Oh, I wish I'd been here a long time. I don't like being new here. How do you do, Mr. Simpson?
How do you do, Emily? Emily continues to look around with a wondering smile. As though to shut out from her mind the thought of the funeral company, she starts speaking to Mrs. Gibbs with a touch of nervousness.
Mother Gibbs, George and I made that farm into the best place you ever saw. We thought of you all the time. We wanted to show you the new barn and a great long cement drinking fountain for the stock. We bought it out of the money you left us.
I did?
Don't you remember, Mother Gibbs, the legacy you left us? Why, it was over $350.
The funeral group breaks up and begins to exit slowly. A small group only remains at grave, including Mr. and Mrs. Webb, George, and Dr. Gibbs, who has no umbrella.
Yes, Emily.
Well, there's a patent device in the drinking fountain so that it never overflows, Mother Gibbs, and it never sinks below a certain mark that they have on there. It's fine. It won't be the same to George now that I'm gone, though. But it's a lovely farm.
Suddenly, she looks directly at Mrs. Gibbs.
Live people don't understand, do they?
No, dear, not very much.
They're sort of shut up in these little boxes, aren't they? I feel as though I knew them last 1,000 years ago. Oh, Mother Gibbs, we have a Ford, too. It never gives any trouble. I don't drive, though. Mother Gibbs, when does this feeling go away? Of being one of them? How long does it...
Hush, dear. Just wait and be patient.
I know.
Mr. and Mrs. Webb and George slowly exit.
Look, they're finished. They're going.
Hush.
Dr. Gibbs kneels to take flowers from grave. Slowly rises and comes over to his wife's grave and stands before her in a moment. Emily looks up at his face. Mrs. Gibbs does not raise her eyes.
Look, Father Gibbs is bringing you some of my flowers. He looks just like George, doesn't he?
Dr. Gibbs lays flowers at his wife's feet, head bowed and sighs.
Oh, Mother Gibbs, I never realized how troubled and how in the dark live persons are. Look at him. I loved him so.
Dr. Gibbs exits slowly, putting his hat on when he is nearly off.
From morning till night, that's all they are. Troubled.
Little cooler than it was. Yes, that's rain. That rain's cooled it off a little. Those northeast winds always do the same thing, don't they? If it isn't rain, it's a 3-day blow. A patient column falls on the stage. The stage manager appears at his proscenium pillar, smoking. Emily sits up abruptly with an idea.
But, Mother Gibbs, one can go back. One can go back there into the living. I know it. I feel it. Just then, for a moment, I was thinking about the farm, and for a minute I was there, and my baby was on my lap as plain as day.
Yes, of course you can.
Well, I can go back there and live all those days over again. Why not?
All I can say is, Emily, don't.
But it's true, isn't it? I can go back there, and I can live back there again.
Yes, you can. Some have tried, but they soon come back here.
Don't do it, Emily.
Emily, don't. It's not what you think it'd be.
But I won't live over a sad day. I'll choose a happy one. I'll choose the day that I first knew that I loved George. Why should that be sad?
You won't only be living it, you'll be watching it too.
Yes?
And as you watch it, you'll know the thing that they down there never do. You see the future. You know what's going to happen afterward.
Is that painful? Why?
That's not the only reason why you shouldn't do it, Emily. When you've been here longer, you'll see that our life here is to forget all that and to only think of what's ahead and be ready for what's ahead. When you've been here longer, you'll understand.
But, Mother Gibbs, how can I ever forget that life? That's all I know. It's all I had.
Oh, Emily, it isn't wise. Really, it isn't.
But I must know for myself. I'll choose a happy day anyway.
No. At least choose an important day. Choose the least important day of your life. It will be important enough.
Well, then it can't be since I was married or since the baby was born. I can choose a birthday, can't I? I choose my 12th birthday.
All right. February 11th, 1899, a Tuesday. Do you want any special time of day?
Oh, I want the whole day.
All right. We'll begin at dawn. You remember it has been snowing for several days, but it had stopped the night before, and the thaw had begun to clearing the roads. The sun is coming up.
The stage at no time in this act has been very dark, but now the left half of the stage gradually becomes very bright, the brightness of a crisp winter morning.
There's Main Street. Why, that's Mr. Morgan's drugstore before he changed it. And there's the library stable.
Yes, it is 1899. This is 14 years ago.
Oh, this is the town I knew as a little girl. And look, there's the old white fence that used to be in front of our house. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, I loved it so. Are they inside?
Yes, your mother will be coming downstairs in a minute to make breakfast.
Will she?
Yes. And you remember your father has been away for several days. He came back on the early morning train.
No?
He had been back to his college to make a speech in Western New York at Clinton.
Oh, look! There's Howie Newsome. There's our policeman. But he's dead. He died.
The voices of Howie Newsome, Constable Warren, and Joe Crowell Jr. are heard at the left of the stage. Emily listens in delight.
Whoa, Bessie! Morning, Bill.
Morning, Howie.
You're up early.
Been rescuing a party. Darn near froze to death. Down by Town there. Got drunk, laid out in the snowdrift. Thought he was in bed when I shook him.
Oh, and there's Joe Crowell.
Good morning, Mr. Warren. Morning, Howie.
Mrs. Webb has appeared in her kitchen, but Emily does not see her until she calls.
Children! Wally! Emily! Time to get up!
Oh, no, Mama! Mama, I'm here! Oh, look how young Mama was. I didn't know Mama was ever that young.
You can come and dress by the fire if you like, but hurry. Good morning, Mr. Newsome. Oh, it's cold.
10 below by my barn, Mrs. Webb.
Think of it. Keep yourself wrapped up.
She picks up album and takes her bottles in, shuddering. From this point on, she moves no more than 2 short steps from stove, suggesting movements about the kitchen rather than pacing them.
Mama, I can't find my blue hair ribbon anywhere.
Just open your eyes, dear. I placed it there on the dresser. If it were a snake, it would bite you.
Yes.
Emily puts her hand on her heart. Mr. Webb comes along Main Street to Center, where he meets Constable Warren. Their movements and voices are increasingly lively in the sharp air. Mrs. Webb comes to the cupboard for dishes and silver, then to set table where it used to stand, making 2 quick trips.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Mr. Webb. You're up early.
Well, yes, I had to make a trip to my old college back in New York State. Been any trouble around here?
No, well, I was called up this morning to rescue a Polish fella. Darn near froze to death, he was.
Well, we ought to get it in the paper.
Wasn't much.
Papa.
Good morning, honey.
How did it go, Charles?
Well, fine, I guess. Told him one thing and another. Everything all right here?
Yes, can't think of anything that happened special. Been right cold. Howie Newsome just told me it was 10 below over to his barn.
Well, you ought to see. It's even colder back at Hamilton College. Kids' ears are falling off. It ain't Christian. Paper have any mistakes in it?
None that I noticed. Coffee's ready when you want it. Charles, remember, today is Emily's birthday. Did you remember to get her something?
Well, yes, I got it right here. Where's my birthday girl? Where's my birthday girl?
Don't interrupt her now, Charles. You'll see her at breakfast. She's slow as it is. Hurry up, children! It's 7 o'clock! No, I don't want to call you again!
I can't bear it. They're so young and beautiful. Why did they ever have to get old? Mama, I'm here. I'm grown up. I love you. Everything. I can't look at everything hard enough.
She looks questioningly at the stage manager, saying or suggesting, "Can I go in?" He nods briefly. She crosses to the inner door to the kitchen, left of Mother, and as though she entering the room says, suggesting the voice of a girl at the age of 12.
Good morning, Mama.
Well now, dear, a very happy birthday to my girl and many happy returns. There are some surprises waiting for you on the kitchen counter.
Oh, Mama, you shouldn't have. I can't.
But birthday or no birthday, I want you to eat your breakfast good and slow. I want you to grow up to be a good, strong girl. That in the blue papers from your Aunt Carrie. And I reckon you can guess who brought the postcard album. George Gibbs must have came over early in the cold. Right nice of him.
Oh, George. I'd forgotten that.
Chew that bacon good and slow. It'll help keep you warm on a cold day.
Oh, Mama, just look at me for 1 minute as though you really saw me. Mama, 14 years have gone by. I'm dead. You're a I married George Gibbs, Mama. Wally's dead, too. His appendix burst on a camping trip to North Conway. We felt just terrible about it, don't you remember? But just for a moment, now we're all together. Mama, just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another.
That in the yellow paper is something I found in the attic among your grandmother's things. You're old enough to wear it now, and I thought you liked it.
And this is from you. Why, Mama, it's lovely, and it's just what I wanted. It's beautiful.
Well, I hope you liked it. Hunted all over for it. Your Aunt Nora couldn't find one in Concord, so I had to send all the way up to Boston. Wally has something for you, too. He made it at manual training camp, and he's very proud of it. Be sure to make a big fuss when you open it. Oh, and your father got you something, too. Don't know what it is myself. Oh, shh, here he comes.
Where's my girl? Where's my birthday girl?
I can't go on. It goes so fast. We don't even have time to look at one another. I didn't realize. So all that was going on and we never noticed. Take me back. Up the hill to my grave. But first, one more look. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners. Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers and food and coffee and new iron dresses and hot baths and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Do any human beings ever really realize life as they live it? Every minute?
No. Some saints and poets, maybe. They do, some.
I'm ready to go back.
She returns to her chair beside Mrs. Gibbs. As she does, the lights dim, leaving only a deep blue, except for amber on the dead. Pause.
Were you happy?
No. I should have listened to you. That's all human beings are, just blind people.
Look, it's clearing up. The stars are coming out.
Mr. Stimson, I should have listened to them.
Yes. Now you know. Now you know that's what it was to be alive. To move about in a cloud of ignorance, to go up and down trampling on the feelings of those about you, to spend and waste time as though you had a million years, to be always at the mercy of one self-centered passion or another. Now you know. That's the happy existence you wanted to go back to, ignorance and blindness.
Simon Stimson, that ain't the whole truth, and you know it. Emily, take a look at that star. I forget its name.
My boy Joel was a sailor. Knew 'em all. He'd sit on the porch evenings and tell 'em all by name. Yes, sir. Wonderful. Stars mighty good company. It is. Here's one of them coming. That's funny. Ain't no time for one of them to be here. Goodness sake.
Mother Gibbs, it's George.
Hush, dear. Just rest yourself.
It's George.
And my boy Joel, who knew the stars, he used to say it took millions of years for the speck of light to get to the Earth. Don't seem like a body could believe it, but that's when he used to say. George sinks to his knees, then falls full length at Emily's feet. That's no way to behave.
He ought to be home.
Mother Gibbs,
Yes, Emily?
they don't understand, do they?
No, dear. They don't understand.
Train whistle off stage. Stage manager appears at the right, one hand on a dark curtain, which he slowly draws across the scene. In the distance, a clock is heard, striking the hour very faintly.
Most everybody's asleep in Grover's Corners. There are a few lights on. Shorty Hawkins, down by the depot, has just watched the Albany train go by. And at the livery stable, someone's setting up late and talking. Yes, it's clearing up. There are stars doing their old crisscross journeys up in the sky. Scholars haven't settled the matter yet, but they seem to think that there are no living beings up there. Just think that they're chalk or fire. Only this one is straining away. Straining away all the time to make something of itself. The strain's not so bad. But every 16 hours, somebody lays down and gets to rest. Yes. Yes. 11 o'clock in Grover's Corners. You get a good rest as well. Good night.
The end.